everybody. This is the first show of 2018, and it's an extremely special one because we have with us today Dr. David Munson, who not that many months ago became the 10th president of the Rochester Institute of Technology. He comes to Rochester with a very distinguished pedigree as an academic, as a technologist, and actually even as a co-founder. He started off his career receiving 2 masters and a PhD, all from Princeton in engineering. Then he embarked on a teaching career, and most recently he was the Dean of Engineering at the University of Michigan. And as I mentioned, I'm sure there probably are some university presidents of his level that have started startups, but I wasn't able to find any, and certainly in this area. And now he's come here to lead RIT, which, as all of you know, is one of the most important institutions to the local economy and to the ecosystem. So welcome, Dr. David Munson. And maybe the first question is, how have you found your job these first few months?
Thanks a lot, Alex, and thanks to everyone for coming out on a beautiful, balmy evening. I had never been in this venue, and I kind of peeked in the door and didn't see too many people and wondered if anybody would be here, and here you are. That's fantastic. My first 6 months at RIT have been great. RIT's been everything I was hoping it would be, and we still have a lot of headroom to grow and get better, and so we're hard at work on that. Actually, Rochester is sort of like a hybrid between, if I liken it to cities in Michigan, between Ann Arbor, which of course is a college town, and with a lot of culture and arts, and Grand Rapids, which has a river that goes right through the middle of it, and it's the same size as Rochester. And Grand Rapids actually has kind of a similar story to Rochester. Years ago, it's really the economy had gone down, and now it's just come roaring back. There's a lot of philanthropy in the town and a lot of activities of universities there, and so I think Rochester's on exactly that same path. It's exciting.
Now, one of the things that, of course, this audience in particular is interested in is the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And in many ways, you came to this community really with a fresh set of eyes about what are its strengths and perhaps its weaknesses with regard to the entrepreneurial activity and support system. What are your impressions specifically of that sector of Rochester?
Well, I think there's a lot of great work being done related to entrepreneurship at the universities and also in downtown Rochester at a number of different places. Based on the experience I've had most recently in Ann Arbor, it's all about the ecosystem, and it's all about networking and establishing relationships, but not just relationships locally, relationships especially to the Bay Area, California, and other regions in the country that have a lot of venture capital and a lot of expertise. We have quite a number of universities, obviously, right here locally, and we have exported a fair amount of talent to the West Coast as well as various cities on the East Coast. And it's time to call some of those people home, but for the ones that don't come home, it's time to form really strong connections with them and make sure they're aware of what we have and what we're developing here, and then calling on them for help.
Well, and speaking of help, you had a very positive event or kind of news event recently with an alum. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was?
Yes, we did. Yeah, and I give Bill Dessler a lot of credit for creating the original relationship with our alum, Austin McCord. And most of you in this room, I think, know Austin founded a company called Datto. But he started out at RIT, and in his own words, was not particularly successful as a student. It probably didn't help that he never did any homework. But at any rate, he left the university before he finished his degree, moved back home to Connecticut, and started his company. I asked Austin, where did you get the idea for the company? I was expecting, there was some stroke of genius, some brilliant insight, and Austin's reply was, well, I had a lot of ideas, I just chose one. And that's about all he had to say about that. But anyway, he got the company going, and then he did ultimately finish his degree at RIT. And an early thing he did was open a branch of Datto, of course, right here in Rochester, which employs, I think, at least a couple of hundred now, and they intend to grow that. But Bill was talking to Austin, and wanting Austin to think philanthropically, and Austin is just a very, very kind and generous person. It's almost unprecedented for someone of his age to make a gift of the magnitude that he did, $50 million. Usually people are saving up all that money to sort of play the game and invest it in the next thing and the next thing. But Austin, he's still got plenty in reserve. He amazingly, he owned the majority of the company. I don't believe he ever took any venture capital funding. And he was very generous with his employees, so he has a lot of employees that are also very well-to-do today, which is wonderful, and he's so proud of them and just thankful for how things have turned out.
Well, and I know it's early going for you in terms of your tenure within the university, but thinking about the gift in particular from Austin and some of the other programs that are in play or in process, or things you want to put in process, what are the things that you expect to see RIT doing to help or create more entrepreneurship in the coming years?
Yeah, great question, Alex. So we're going to be actually doubling down on what we're really good at. We're really good at innovation and creative sort of activity. But amazingly, we haven't actually recruited those types of students in a very intentional way. They just sort of find RIT and they show up, partly because of our reputation. But we're going to be specifically recruiting creative students who want to innovate, students who have created something in the past before they even arrive in Rochester. It doesn't have to be a startup, it may be something else. And we're going to be building some new facilities. I don't want to talk a lot about those yet, but I can talk about one of them because a fair chunk of Austin's gift is going to go toward a very large and I think impressive maker facility. We're hoping that will sit between our existing library and our Student Alumni Union. Part of the plan is to renovate both of those facilities and build a third structure that will sit right in between, and then redistribute some of the activities we currently have in our student center, in our library, but then add to that a large maker facility and some other things. And that'll sort of be the centerpiece on campus, so that when visitors come and show up at that facility, they'll see the creation, the making happening right in front of them. Right now we have making all over campus in many different forms, but the majority of it is hidden behind solid walls or on an upper floor of a building. And we really want to get that right out in front of all our visitors and prospective students.
What are the technology trends that you see in the workplace or more broadly that you think RIT has particular strengths and that you see as being the source of more of this innovation activity?
Yeah, so the list is pretty long. I think people in this room are very familiar with our activities in electronic gaming, and then that spreads into virtual reality, augmented reality, and some things involving artificial intelligence. So we just have a very, very strong gaming program at RIT, and of course some spin-offs right here in Rochester. A lot of the movies that come out of Hollywood now have their special effects done by RIT alums and companies owned by RIT alums. And so we're very strong in that area, and I think you'll see a lot more happening with artificial reality and virtual reality. Another area is computer security, cybersecurity. We're very strong there. edX is the leading nonprofit online purveyor of education. edX was founded by MIT and Harvard. We're a member there, and we're pretty much the designated #1 provider of coursework to the nation on edX in cybersecurity. We have some fantastic teachers, and we're starting to develop a very strong research program there and some relationships with corporations that may lead us to having some kind of one-of-a-kind type university facilities for work in cybersecurity. So those are a few areas, but overall we want to try to blend creation and the arts with technology in new ways. I'm very much about both sides there. If RIT was simply the Rochester Institute of Technology, you probably wouldn't see me here in Rochester, but it's the fact that the university has more than technology and does some really unusual things in the arts. And we're going to be actually trying to build our arts programs, working on that and kind of rounding out the university.
Now, I mentioned a little bit, a little bit earlier that you actually are the co-founder of a startup, or were the co-founder of a startup.
Right.
And I'd love to hear more about maybe how that experience also informs your interest in terms of what maybe the tech transfer department could do to help people in the broader Rochester community.
Yeah, sure. So this story goes back to my time at the University of Illinois. And a colleague there had been doing some work in CT, computer tomography, fast algorithms for image formation in that type of system. And then I had a student who followed up and did some work there, and together he and I formed a startup company. And that is still located back in Champaign, Illinois. I went on shortly thereafter to become to get into administrative work at the University of Michigan, and so my colleague has spent more time on the company than I have by a long shot. But I certainly learned about how the innovation process works in a university in terms of, yeah, you've got the basic idea, but you've got to take it a lot further than that before you can commercialize it. And in terms of, you got to protect the IP, and so we've got a set of patents, and you've got to license the patents from the university to get the startup company going. And then I became very familiar with how those negotiations go and what the university is looking to get out of things, and what, of course, the inventors are looking to get out. But then at the University of Michigan, I was pretty passionate about entrepreneurship, and when I became Dean of Engineering there, we made that really one of the cornerstones of what we were going to work on. At the time, the business school at Michigan had a center in entrepreneurship, but they worked mostly with MBA students and just a sprinkling of others. And I saw this groundswell of student interest in entrepreneurship across the whole campus. So we launched a second center in entrepreneurship. This one was based in engineering, but it was open especially to undergrads in any discipline. And within 3 years, we had, I would say, about 2,500 students involved. But the secret there was, back to what I mentioned earlier, was about building the network. It was not our tenure track faculty that were teaching the courses. It was lots and lots of adjunct faculty that we brought into our network, many of whom happened to be Michigan alums, but not all of them. And we really got that rolling in a big way, and then of course had all the standard student incubator startup spaces and things like that, and various kinds of pitch competitions. One thing we did that was pretty unusual was we started taking a plane load of our students to the Bay Area every spring break. And that's still ongoing. In fact, that trip has been endowed by a corporation to keep it going. But what would happen there is students would arrive, and our alums would actually put on essentially an entrepreneurial boot camp for the students. So lots of panels and little sessions and that sort of thing, and of course the judging of the pitches. And we would also take our students through all of the standard companies, and Google and Apple and Facebook and Twitter and what have you, because we had highly placed alums in all those companies, and so they got to see all of that. That worked out really well. Then we expanded the program a little bit, started visiting New York City and Chicago and what have you. But it was really about building the network, and we were able to engage our alumni across the whole country in this sort of activity, and then they wanted to come back to campus and spend time with our students. And so I think that's going to be one of the tricks we need to play here in Rochester, is export our people a little bit, but we got to bring back the alumni and get them involved.
It was really interesting earlier on talking about the idea of using entrepreneurial potential as one way to kind of screen some of the applicants that you have. Some people believe that actually the value of an entrepreneurship type education is not even so much about creating a bunch of companies, but just in terms of the mindset and the skills that it creates in those students for a lifetime, no matter what they end up. Do you kind of have a view as to what entrepreneurship does as a discipline?
It pretty much mirrors the direction you're heading here. Yeah, in this big program that we launched at Michigan with those thousands of students, fully half of them were from the liberal arts. And they weren't all interested in starting a company. Some of them might have been interested in starting a social movement or doing something else. But what we really stressed, and this is common terminology now, is just the entrepreneurial mindset. And no matter what you're going to be doing in later life, the entrepreneurial mindset is going to be very helpful to you to to really go after big problems, and maybe as you get started, you don't have all the resources you need, you don't have all the people you need, you're not sure exactly how you're going to tackle the problem, but you do it anyway, and you may succeed, you may fail, and if you fail, as we always say, you fail fast and learn something and get right back up and go after it again, and that's useful in life in general. So we had a lot of coursework and a lot of experiences that were designed to let our students fail frequently.
So that's good. That's important. That's important.
And still remain in school.
Yeah. And so, yes, it's important to learn from failure. So maybe thinking about that for a minute, have you come to any impressions about what is it that the broader Rochester region can do, in terms of supporting RIT, supporting entrepreneurship in general, both in terms of things maybe that it's doing now, but also things you could envision a few years from now?
Well, I'm still learning about this because there are multiple organizations in Rochester that work in the entrepreneurial arena. And so there's High Tech Rochester and a host of others. I won't go through the whole list. I'm still figuring out how all these pieces fit together and form a puzzle and create a picture that we can all understand and explain, not just to outsiders, but even to ourselves. And then, of course, the universities have a lot of potential to work together as well. I've been here all of 6 months, and so there are many people in the room that are much more knowledgeable about what the landscape looks like here than am I. But I think ultimately we need everybody pulling together and working together, and this certainly seems like a city where that happens all the time.
Now, one of the interesting things about both RIT and U of R is how prominent and important they've also become as employers in this community, so driving economic development from that standpoint. What's kind of your view and your thoughts about RIT in the future and its overall growth as an employer and as an economic force in the region?
Yeah, well, I guess there are multiple things I could say. I mean, obviously RIT is a big place, and we do employ a lot of people. We could just sit out there on our own little campus and kind of mind our own business, but that's not what's going to happen. We're going to be very involved in the city of Rochester. Just because of our size, I think we have an obligation to the community. And there are different ways we can be involved in terms of our students offering lots of hours of service to the community, what have you, which happens. But I think a special way will be through our activities in entrepreneurship and economic development. I think we have probably a special role to play there, and you'll see us doing that.
Now, one of the things that I think a lot of people are very interested in is how does technology and innovation affecting universities themselves? And in particular, I'm talking about all of the online courses, virtual learning environments. What are your thoughts about the ways that RIT will actually transform itself in the coming years to utilize that technology?
Boy, we could turn this into a strategic planning workshop. This would be great. Golly, technology is affecting not just folks off campus, but right in the middle of campus. And so we're getting very involved in online education. In that edX organization I mentioned, I think we might be something like the 5th largest provider in the nation of online courses on that platform, which is amazing. Given that RIT is not presently as well known as, say, an MIT and some others, but RIT is right up there with all the big boys in that arena. So we're doing a lot with online education, but I'm very interested, to get back to your question, in what we learn there and what we can apply there to our students on campus, because there's a lot of technology we employ that will allow us to teach our on-campus students in different ways. And so one thing that we actually want to put into this facility that I mentioned earlier, that's partially funded by Austin McCord, is a bunch of new style classrooms that are just full of technology, flat floors, all the furniture is mobile, so that students can be working as groups during the lecture hour rather than sitting and just watching a person like me talk to them. So that's certainly one area. Another thing I'll mention is as we become more research intensive at RIT, it used to be that there was theoretical research and kind of pencil and paper and proving theorems and doing calculations and what have you. And then there was experimental work, which was really being at the lab bench, a wet lab or what have you. But now, of course, there's that in-between kind of work, which involves very, very sophisticated computer simulation. And so like other universities, we're now building our capability in high-performance computing, because we have a lot of faculty members where that high-performance computer really is their research tool. That's what they need. And of course, this is all another example of technological innovation completely changing how we do our work.
Are there particularly audacious goals that you have that you want to perhaps share for RIT in your tenure? I know it's very early to think about your legacy at this point at RIT, but what are the things you're thinking about that could be of that level?
Instead of answering the question directly, I'll say a few things. For that student out there, and there are lots and lots of these students in high school that are really good in the arts, really good singers or dancers or performers, but they know that's not what they're going to do for a living. Maybe they want to study computer science or mechanical engineering, or maybe some STEM discipline. I would like for RIT to be the school of choice for that student, and for RIT to offer the best performing arts experiences in the nation to non-majors. And so we're starting a lot of thinking in that direction. There's a huge intersection, and people in this room are probably aware of this, in terms of human brains. There's a huge intersection between ability in math and science and ability in the performing arts. Now, it's not a perfect correlation, but it's a very strong correlation. And I witnessed that just over and over again. I had lots of data at Michigan in terms of my engineering students. 70% of them were musicians. And actually, I wasn't surprised to hear that. It mirrored my own family. And there are a lot of students out there that want to do both things, and do both things at a high level. And so we want to use that as a mechanism to attract a lot of the most creative and multi-talented students possible to RIT and to Rochester. So that's one pretty lofty goal. Overall, another thing we're going to be working on is tremendously building out our research programs. RIT has been known until more recent years as a very career-focused institution and offering primarily education and then just a little bit of research. But I think we're going to become a much, much bigger research institution. That was ordained before, or preordained before I arrived. You know, the Board of Trustees want to see that happen, and I know Ryan Raffelli, our Vice President for Research, is here in the audience, so giving Ryan a job right now. But we're going to be working on actually not just building research based on our existing faculty. We're going to need to hire some other kinds of faculty in order for us to compete at the highest level. So a lot of this is going to have to do with faculty recruitment and going toe-to-toe with the best universities in the nation to land the very best faculty members. That's what I'm used to doing, and that's what we intend to do here in Rochester.
Excellent. Well, we're going to take questions, but first let's give a warm hand to